Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I'm Scott. This is part two or part one of my weekly reading wrap up. I'm going to talk about what I've read in June so far as Sapphic romances go. I am doing two separate videos, one for non Sapphic romance books and one for Sapphic romance books, because right now Sapphic romance books is, for lack of a better term, my guilty pleasure. It is my potato chips. It's my Diet Coke. It's that thing where I'm kind of like just chugging through and it's like, oh, I finished this. I'm not going to tell you how many books I have finished in June so far because it's embarrassing. I could tell you, I could look at the database that I keep, but whatever number you might think, it's probably higher than it actually is. So I'm not going to go over every Sapphic book that I read so far in June. And starting next week, I should just do this weekly. But since I've been a little bit behind, this is me catching up. But I will talk about some of the series that I have read and some of the highlights and lowlights of what I've read so far in June as far as Sapphic romance books go. Let's go ahead and get started. One series that I finished so far, I don't know if they're going to be further books in the series, so I can't say for sure that I've finished it, but I have read all the books so far in the series, is Nicole Pyland's sports series. I have talked about this series before. I first read, I can't remember the exact title, but it's Crashing Through something. It has to do with skiing. It is, I think, the seventh book in the series, but it was the first book I read. And you don't need to read these books necessarily in any order. But then I read Always More, which is the first book in the series, and then A Shot at Gold, which is the second book in the series. And I really disliked both of those books, despite really liking the seventh book about skiing. So I kind of backed off on the series. Part of the reasons I disliked the first two books is they had to do with inappropriate relationships. Now, obviously, reading romance books, we're going to encounter inappropriate relationships. It's fiction, so sometimes it's okay to read about something that possibly in real life you'd be like, no, can't do that. But the problem I have is I just don't think, from my experience with Nicole Pyland, I don't think she handles inappropriate relationships well. Uh, and fortunately, because these are the first three Nicole Pyland books that I read, fortunately for me, is most of the other books that I've read from her since then don't really have to do with inappropriate relationships because based on what I know, she doesn't do them very well. Uh, but the other books in the series, Spin Serve, which has to do with beach volleyball, Always More had to do with regulation volleyball. Spin Serve, I think it's the most recent book. It's book 8, has to do with one of the beach volleyball players and basically a courtside reporter. Uh, really like that one. Side by Side had to do with figure skating. Uh, in this, and I don't know if this is a factual thing or not. I haven't checked up on it. Uh, Obviously not at the Olympic level, but under the Olympic level, they allow for same-sex pair skating, and two women who went to a skating program before, but who had a falling apart, uh, end up trying to do this together. I did like this one. Some of the outside of the main characters, like the parents and the sister, were a little bit too much for me, so I still liked it, but I didn't like it as much as like Spin Serve. Uh, Finding a Keeper has to do with college soccer. I did like this one. The best ones to me, and I've especially found Nicole Pyland, deal with something else also. Uh, this one has a lot to do with dealing with grief. One of the characters, I think Sloane, there's a lot of books. I don't remember names. I remember who they are, but I don't remember names. But I think I'm correct here. Sloane, her mother died giving birth to her, and partway through the book, slight spoiler, it does happen fairly soon in the book. Partway through the book, her father dies of a heart attack, so she's essentially an orphan. So it's not just the soccer that we're dealing with grief also. Making it count. Oh, this one had to do with college basketball. I didn't dislike this one as much as Always More and A Shot at Gold. There's no inappropriate relationship, but it is set during the first year of COVID, and I don't think I enjoyed that. Basically, a relationship happening when the people can't actually be together. Uh, and The Unexpected Dream has to do with softball. Uh, Also, one of the players in it is a single mother. Uh, Both of the main characters are dealing with injuries. Oh, well, no, the other character is dealing with injuries. The one is a single mother, and they're both trying to get to the Olympics. I like the characters. I don't think the story was as strong as it could have been, or as strong as some of the first books I talked about. There's also the Celebrity series by Nicole Pyland. No After You, which is it's technically the first book in the series, although it wasn't published until after the other books in the series. But it has to do with basically getting the main couple of the series together. I say main because they are prominent in each of the books, even though they're not the main characters in any of the other three books. The second book in the series is All the Love Songs, which has to do with Peyton's best friend, Lennox, who's an actress, and another actress, Kenzie. Kenzie is very shy. Also, turns out, which is mentioned fairly quickly, she has Asperger's, or I guess we don't use Asperger's anymore, but she's on the spectrum. Uh, this book, I think, was published like in 2019, I think. So I don't know if the terminology was okay then or not, but that's what it says in the book. And basically, their relationship developing. Kenzie is a lesbian. Lennox is straight. They are both crushing on each other before they even meet. This was probably my favorite of the Celebrity series. One of my favorites, if not my favorite, of Pylands that I've read overall. Uh, Midnight Traditions is about Maddox. She's a fashion photographer, I believe, and I can't remember the name of the other character, but she's an app developer. They meet on New Year's Eve at Danny and Peyton's house, and pretty much almost the entirety of this book has to do with this night and a little bit after. It's not as strong as the previous two. Uh, a lot of it just feels kind of like comedy of errors kind of thing. Uh, in the bad guy in this book happens to be the main character in the next book, which is Path Forward. She's an actress. She's kind of because she previously cheated on Maddox, one of the main characters of Midnight Traditions. She's kind of been ostracized from the group, and she's trying to make up for her past, which we see in this book. She she cheated, but not that there's an excuse for cheating, but Maddox isn't 100%, the innocent victim here. Mostly the innocent victim, but the relationship wasn't working before the cheating. Uh, I got to be honest. These two last books weren't that great for me. They were okay. I really liked the first two, especially uh, all the love songs. Then I read two series by Anna Stone. One, Mistress, 4 books in it. And both these series are BDSM related, although I would say not heavy BDSM. There's definitely a lot of explicit content in these books, but and I don't know what this says about me, but I don't think it's overly so. I don't know if people will read these and go like, "Oh my god," but explicit, not graphically so. I think not. It wasn't vanilla, but it wasn't like you got problems, man. So, but the 4 books in Mistress were Tangled Vows, Ensnared Hearts, Forever Those, and Guarded Desire. And Tangled Vows, and I think this is the case with all these books in both these series, it has to do with a wealthy woman or women and a much poorer woman. That seems to be a trend in all the Anna Stone books that I've read so far. I may be off and miss one, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But Yvonne marries an escort, Ruby, in order to get her inheritance. She has to be married to somebody for at least a year. And of course, Yvonne's a control freak. Ruby's got submissive tendencies. Yada, yada, yada. Uh, and then it's Lydia is basically in upper management uh, at the same corporation that Lydia works in. And she has an intern cat who has submissive qualities. Uh, and that's an Ensnared Hearts. And Forever There's Gabriella also works in the same corporation. She has a girlfriend, Danny, who is a fashion designer. The two of them discover Chloe, who is the owner of a flower shop, and they want to have a relationship with her, the both of them. And Chloe is, of course, submissive qualities. And the last one, Guarded Desires. Carmen is a bodyguard who is hired by Amber, who is basically being stalked. Amber is also part of the same corporation as the other, and Carmen is the bodyguard who has submissive qualities. Uh, I these books were fine. 3 of them, I read them. They are really like potato chips to me. It's like while I was eating them, it's like cool, and then I forgot them. Interestingly enough for me, Forever Theirs, the one in which it's Gabrielle and Danny who are girlfriends who get with Chloe, that was the best of the books. I think it came across as a little bit deeper than the other ones. Perhaps it's just because there were the 3 women, but the other ones almost kind of felt like paint by numbers. I don't think that necessarily the characters were bad, but they were kind of interchangeable in a way. Uh, the other series I read was Irresistibly Bound, uh, which being hers had Melanie and Vanessa in it. Melanie, of course, being a submissive. Oh, and Melanie ended up working for Vanessa after they meet. Uh, in her surrender, April is a librarian trying to keep her library uh, open, going against Vicky, who is like a vice president of the company, is trying to basically get the library out of there so they can put up condos or whatever it is that they want to put up. In hers to keep, Lindsay joins a website for somebody to be a sugar baby. She's basically selling her virginity, and uh, it's won by Camilla, who doesn't want her to end up going to someone who would take advantage of her submissive qualities, dominant qualities. And the last one is freeing her. Faith is a nanny, Eve is a single mother. I'm gonna be honest, that one is the one I like the least. Neither of these characters stand out particularly well. Probably of this series, maybe being hers is my favorite. These are all pretty much interchangeable for me. And I have mentioned that Anna Stone, many of her books have the same trend. I think the first books I read by her were also co-written with Mildred Billings, I believe, the Black Diamond series, except for Forever Theirs, which I really enjoyed. The Black Diamond series is probably the best of what I've seen from her. There is also The Boss of her, which I've read, but I'm blanking on. But to be honest, a lot of her books have the same types of characters. So, oh, somebody's a boss. I can't remember who the characters are in that book. If I looked it up, I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. But started reading Clare Lydon books this month. I think 4 or 5 I've read. The ones that stick out are Change of Heart. Uh, a woman goes back to her home and decides to basically hire an actress to act as her date to get her family off her back. Uh, the actress has something in her past that has an impact on this family. Can't get into it without spoiling it. I really enjoyed it. I think this may have been the first Clare Lydon book I read, which kind of set the standard high for me. Didn't always meet it. I don't think I've had a Clare Lydon book that I disliked, but most of them are kind of like, oh, okay, popcorn or potato chips. But the other one I like is Before You Say I Do, which a woman is getting married and she hires a professional bridesmaid who kind of acts as and does all the things that you might expect a maid of honor to do. Uh, and of course, she and the bride uh, develop an interest in each other. Uh, I kind of liked a little bit of the back and forth between these two in the attraction and the trying to keep the attraction away that they did. Uh, a couple of books by Harper Bliss also. Harper Bliss tends to push the boundaries a little bit, which a family affair, a woman finds herself attracted to her husband's sister, and the sister has always found her attractive, but of course, there's the whole husband thing getting in the way. Uh, it doesn't shy away from some things. Of course, the husband is not perfect in any way, but there's not really anything in here that gives them the excuse like, oh, hey, it's okay that we get together, because it does deal with that. Whether or not you think it deals with it well, it's up to you. I liked it. I kind of like the Harper Bliss books that kind of push boundaries a little. I have found that the ones that she's written that don't push it in some way just don't work for me. I started the Pink Bean series. I only read one book, and that one doesn't really push anything for me, and I didn't find it interesting. But another one that did, although it's not really boundary pushing, but it's and then she kissed me. Uh, Again, sorry, I don't remember the names, but an actress comes back home and spend time with her family. She sees the woman who used to be her best friend until they were like 16, and the friend at that time kissed her, and the actress slapped her, and they pretty much split up. Haven't been friends since then. And now the actress comes back and she finds herself attracted. Uh, Upon reflection, I think I gave this a 4.5 star when I first rated it. I probably would give it a 4 star now, but I still like it. But I think it was just kind of recency bias on it, like A Family Affair, which I believe I read before, and then She Kissed Me, really sticks out to me. This one sticks out to me, but not as memorably. So maybe a 4.25 stars. If I did quarter stars, I would do it. The Road Home by Erin Zach, an actress who everybody in the book makes sure to let her know, hey, you're not a very good actress, or you would do this. She goes home for her father's birthday party, finds out that her mom is sick, has cancer, not doing well, finds that her parents basically have a surrogate daughter there who loves them, uh, also happens to be gay, which the main reason she left was she was gay and they did not accept her. And everybody treats her like shit. Uh, there's a deathbed blackmailing happening. Uh, the other main character uh, attacks her verbally for being mad that she kept a secret from her about her parents because she promised her parents. Um, it basically is like, hey, we treated like you like shit when you were coming out, and you need to step up because of that. It's like, no, you're the parents. Parents got to be parents. I gave this one a 1.5 star. I generally like Aaron Zach books. I have discovered, except for one book, Creating a Life to Live or Life to Love, uh, except for that one, her earlier books don't generally like. I do generally like her later books, at least a little bit more. And I really like Creating a Life to Live or Creating a Life to Love. I can't remember the exact title. But her earlier ones, with which this is the worst, generally didn't like as much. Okay, I'll talk about this one later. But I also read books by Lisa Gold, several books, Along the Mystic River, Songbirds of Sedona, Fireflies, The Center Rome, and written with Madeleine Taylor in the Mirror. The things I like generally about Lisa Gold, it's Lise Gold, I guess. Lise, Lise Gold, I assume, is that there's more depth to it. I also read another one that I can't remember the title of, but it wasn't particularly good. So maybe only wrote the ones that I liked. Uh, but like Songbirds of Sedona is about a woman who basically is recovering from a breakup, who has inherited a fruit farm from her aunt, and she hires a recently released felon, and they're both dealing with loneliness. The felon is dealing with guilt. She did commit the crime that she was convicted of. You can kind of feel how you feel about the crime. I kind of like, yes, it is a crime, but also, yes, I understand it. And it's about them developing a relationship. And also, when people find out about the felon, about her past, having to deal with that also. I really like that one. Fireflies is a pilot in a purser on an airline. Uh, Develop a relationship. They also both are alcoholics. Uh, I like this one. I didn't like it as much as some of the other ones I read, but I do like how it deals with that in with relapses and the feelings of guilt and feelings of control. That one's good. The Scent of Rome. There's not necessarily a lot of depth to this as far as the characters go before they meet. One of them, Rome. Her name is Rome. She happens to be visiting Rome. Uh, she's an she's an app developer for an app that works on climate change. She meets the men that she's trying to get to put money in for this. One of them has hired a high end escort. In this case, what they mean by escort is basically a paid companion. There's no sex involved. In the escort, Nadine is attracted to Rome. Rome is straight. Uh, but Rome is not that straight, apparently. Uh, Nadine doesn't do relationships. Very common trope in these books. Uh, and then there is, after the two of them develop their relationship, there's it's not between the two of them, but there is an issue of sexual harassment uh, that is brought up here. Again, not between the two of them. And along the Mystic River, two women, one woman basically comes to the town of Mystic because she has heart issue, has been told by her doctor, you have to cut stress out of your life, or so she basically just buys a house sight unseen, has her assistant do it really. It just happens to be a house that the other woman used to live in, but because of money problems that her family has ended up losing, she's always wanted to buy it back. And then this rich woman from the big city just buys it. Now that usually sets up a enemies to lovers thing, but they're never really enemies. It's like yeah, I bought this house. This is the house you want. But they almost just become friends pretty quickly. Now, one of the ones I don't remember the names, but the woman who bought the house is straight, and the town woman who is a contractor is not, and she doesn't do relationships. Um, I like this one too. I would say the trend with Lisi Gold books is generally 4 to 4.5 stars for these books. I think I've read 7 or 8 of hers. Probably only 1 or 2 have ranked under 4 stars, I would say. But my favorite of hers so far is one she wrote with Madeleine Taylor. It's In the Mirror. Uh, Sorry again, blanket on the names. Uh, Faith is a fashion photographer, and she drunkenly hires, I think, Sylvie, who is a personal trainer. So Sylvie shows up on New Year's Day to train Faith, and the two of them have body issues, which we find out pretty quickly with Faith. Just a little bit further with Sylvie. I think Faith has bulimia. Sylvie has dealt with anorexia in the past. Of course, Faith is working in a business in which having the right body is essential. And so they're dealing with their own body issues, but also Faith is dealing with body issues in the business she works in and how she's dealing with that. And she has a half sibling who is a model. And of course, Faith is straight, Sylvie is not. Um, but they're very obviously attracted to each other pretty quickly. I really like the relationship between the two. I like almost all the relationships in here. I like the overall message beyond just the romance part of it. Like I said, probably my favorite of Lacey Gold's book. Maybe Living is up there. With that was the first one I read by her, and I read that I think last month or in April. That one's very good. I think possibly with recency bias, I enjoy this one a little bit more, but they're both very good books. I have read other books, but there aren't any that really come out of that mid level. I talked about the 2 really bad ones I read, and I talked about the ones that are like 4.5 star ones. The other ones I think are like 3 to 4 stars. I had 2 1.5 stars, and oh no, I didn't talk. Oh, I didn't talk about the worst one, which I will be honest, I haven't given a rating yet. I want to think about it, but it is Sierra City by Gerri Hill. It is about a woman who comes back to her small town. She basically left when she was 17. Her father died when she was a teenager. She hasn't talked to her mother since she was 17. And she really dislikes her mother. She is a writer, and the mothers in her books always die horrible deaths. There is also her name's Jessie. I can't remember the name of the other main character, but she is a search and rescue person in Sierra City. She develops a friendship with Annie, who's Jessie's mother. Jessie also doesn't remember pretty much everything that happened between like the ages of 10 or 17. She has blocked it out for reasons. Uh, and for those reasons, I'm going to, one, give you a little bit of a trigger warning. So I've talked about every other book, so you can just stop here if you're bothered by this trigger warning, and also a bit of a spoiler. It turns out that Jessie was abused by her father. Because of that, again, Jessie doesn't remember basically what happened between the ages of 10 or 17. Jessie also, she's a lesbian. She doesn't have relationships. She only uses people. And so she talks to her therapist, and basically the therapist says, you should talk to your mother. So she goes back to try to talk to her mother. Her first trip, she doesn't, but she does talk to the other woman. I can't remember her name. Sorry. Uh, but she recognizes Jessie, even though Jessie is using the fake name. She reads her book. She knows who she is, but she doesn't let her know that. The problem I have is that the mother and the other woman basically put the obligation on Jessie. It's Jessie's responsibility to repair her relationship with her mother. It's Jesse's responsibility, what's kind of true, to be able to deal with forming relationships. Her mother didn't know what her father was doing, but considering what her mother did know about the relationship, makes her mother a fucking idiot. Uh, this book does not give it's certainly not a guidebook how to deal with victims of abuse. Uh, to me, it is almost a guidebook for, hey, here's how you can make the abuse worse. Um, this first book I read by Gerri Hill. Apparently, Gerri Hill is a very popular Sapphic romance author. From what I have seen, does get into at least heavier subjects. Uh, this one actually got high reviews. I don't understand why, because unfortunately we know women tend to be victims of abuse more than men. We kind of think that people reading this type of book would see that's not how you treat an abuse victim. It's a shitty book. I don't know yet, but it's possibly, at least so far, the worst book that I've read this year. It wasn't written poorly, but the way it handled this subject sucked. And honestly, the author should feel bad and should talk to a psychologist about how to deal with victims of abuse, because Jessie is not a good character, but at least you can say, I know why, because look what she went through. There's no excuse for Annie and the other main character for being somebody you would see next Tuesday. Uh, so yeah, now that is all the books that I have read, or all the books that I'm going to talk about. The other ones, kind of in a mediocre land, so there's no reason to talk about them. But I will come back next week and hopefully talk about every book that I did read this week. Until then, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'll talk to you next time.